What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. We are powered by our good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Check the show notes below. Fresh Roasted Coffee, you'll save 20% off BYP20. And why not? Perfect time as the East Coast is still getting hit with a little snow. You can snuggle up, I guess you can say, to a significant other, the one you love, and watch replays of Super Bowl 59 and enjoy a fresh cup of fresh roasted coffee, the proud sponsor of Back Your Play. And with that, we welcome in our good friend, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on Sports Radio 1029 FM. The Game. You hear him with me on BYP. You also hear him during the week with me as host on The Drive on SR 1029. So Super Bowl 59, it is in the books. And I got to be quite honest, that game was over at the half. I didn't have that on my bingo card. The Philadelphia Eagles putting up 40 and pretty much coincidentally just waxing the Kansas City Chiefs. And perhaps, my friend, effectively ending the dynasty. We'll start first. Besides a little bit of the window dressing, it was a hell of a defensive performance by the Philadelphia Eagles. And we talked all week long on BYP on the drive. I know you mentioned it on your show as well. That defense wins championships. It was all the battle in the trenches. And I'll tell you, that defensive effort by the Eagles, I know you got the numbers in front of you, but the fact that they didn't even blitz Mahomes once and harassed him, and he looked pedestrian at best, it's a lot of credit to Vic Fangio. And listen, defense wins championships, and that's what we saw from the Eagles on Sunday night in New Orleans.
Q was a beatdown. You know, it wasn't even a game, and at halftime it's 24-0. But I go back to when it was 17-0,
Agree.
and that was Cooper DeJean gets the pick six, and it was over from
I
there.
agree. I
And
agree.
and and a lot of people are going to say, oh, referees and all that stuff going into the game. None of that factored in because
Nope.
the Eagles were the better team, and they found something, in particularly in that Chiefs protection scheme where Thuney was on the outside and they just dominate him. Jalen Hunt got the first sack. Then you had Sweat, and then just a myriad of guys getting pressure. And they were trying to double team Jalen Carter, but that wasn't working as well. So great effort by the Eagles, particularly their defense, and you tip your cap to them.
And Lloyd, even at 17 to nothing, again, I'm watching the game unfold and I'm texting you and I'm texting Angel, I'm texting my buddies. I said, well, Kansas City, I feel like this is a 31 to nothing game, but if they can get three and get the ball coming back out of the half, all of a sudden you get a quick touchdown. Now it's 17 to 10. And what happens? He throws another pick. Jalen Hurts hits Brown in the back in the end zone, 24 to nothing. And like, I don't know what the hell the broadcast was talking about, saying that the Chiefs had an opportunity to win. The game was over. I mean, it's just, they came out flat. Kelsey had the early drop. Mahomes taking some bad snaps, bad sacks, running across his body, to his right, thrown across his body, ill-advised. He was beyond pedestrian. And offensively for the Eagles, we talked about it as well. I mentioned it yesterday on the show, on the drive with Q. You didn't need Jalen Hurts to just be extraordinary. You just needed him to play smart football, manage down and distance, make the throws that he had to make, and then use his legs a little bit. And that's exactly what he did. And I also felt in that game, with all the naysayers and the criticisms and the critics and the rips and what we've heard over the years, I thought, hey man, go for the jugular. They didn't do it. In the half to close it out. I thought they would have. But, when you get to that, what was it? 24, I think it was 27 to nothing. And the touchdown toss that he threw to Smith, that was to me an FU touchdown toss to his critics. So have we squashed the whole Jalen Hurts is not a franchise quarterback? Jalen Hurts is not a winner. Jalen Hurts cannot win the big game narrative once and for all.
Yeah, it's laughable. After that performance, you can't even say, okay, all season people were saying it was Saquon, it was the offensive line, it's this, that. But Jalen Hurts was the ultimate leader in this game. And, full control, 17 to 23, 221. He did have that interception he threw to Cook early, but it just shows you the resilience of the Eagles. They stopped him like right away. It was almost like a punt because it's kind of deep into their territory. And then he did damage with his leg. 11 rushes, 72 yards, one TD. And he was just very, clear, decisive, surgical out there. And it's nice to play with a lead. And that's what he had. The Chiefs sold out on stopping Saquon, and they got him bottled up. They were hitting him. He got a couple runs here and there. But Hurts made the big throws when he need to. You talk about that one to Smith,
Yeah,
uh, the one
gorgeous.
to Brown, and just early on, he just never got too high, never got too low, and he was dominant. So, yeah, a lot of times people naturally, and even myself, was like, okay, is he good enough to win the big one? Well, he's proven it. He's gotten it done, and a huge win for him and his legacy.
Also too, I thought they keyed so much on Saquon to Kansas City and Spagnuolo and Andy Reid that you look at Saquon's numbers and you might say, yeah, he didn't go off. They didn't allow him to go off. 25 carries, 26 carries, 57 yards as long as it was 10. But he also caught, I think it was 5 or 6 balls out of the backfield on 7 targets. So he almost had 100 total yards from scrimmage, but he was also picking up the blitz and he was making some key blocks to give Jalen Hurts some time to throw to the outside, to get the receivers in position to make some plays. And I thought, on the surface, all right, he didn't go off for a buck 75, but they were so keyed in on him that allowed Hurts to exploit the sidelines against Kansas City and their corners. I mean, and then conversely, offensively for Kansas City, they were beyond afraid to throw the ball, to the DBs and the corners. And we kind of know why with DeJean, but be that as it may, I thought Saquon quietly had a really good game.
He did, and he did his job, and that's what Saquon wanted. The Eagles were a team, and I think going into the game, a lot of us focused too much on the coach and the quarterback matchup,
Fair
and
point.
it was like, you know what, this Eagles squad, and we talked about the roster, the Eagles overall were much better, except that the experience of the coach and the
Right,
quarterback,
right.
and defensively, the Eagles they're number one across the board. And we saw that before, with the Ravens in the past, going back to the Bears, this was a defensive dominant team. And they set the table for the offense just so many times. The Chiefs just had no answer. They punted 6 times in this game. And then a lot of their drives were 3 and outs. They were getting them off the field. And
Out
yeah,
of sync.
you talk about Saquon, he's like, hey, I'm here to do my job and get my ring. And that's what he did. That's what Jalen Hurts did. They they didn't really have to make adjustments. They had a game plan and it just worked perfection.
Bourne, Sweat, Burks, Williams, DeJean with the big pick six. They didn't want to test those guys. Gardner Johnson making plays, Mitchell making plays, Davis making plays, Nolan Smith. Again, you're double teaming this kid, right? He might not account all the time for tackles for loss or tackles, but defensively they all affected the game. And Kansas City, to your point, they were just out of sync from the get-go. Was it overlooking Philadelphia? Was it thinking that they're Golden State back in the day? If we're down by 15, we can just chuck some threes with the Splash Brothers. Was it complacency? Was it cockiness? And I think two statements can be true. You credit the Eagles' defense and what they were able to do. It was a masterful game plan. But then how do you account for Kansas City being so out of sync? Or is it possible? Another option is that what we saw this year from a team that won 14, 15 games and got back to the Super Bowl for a third straight season was smoke and mirrors.
Well, when you look back on the season, like, yeah, they had a lot of, skin in their teeth victories. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe it came back to bite them. They did have 2 wins in the playoffs and Kings of the AFC, but
Yeah.
I just feel like they were like, okay, we beat the Eagles in 2022 in a Super Bowl. This is the same group that's showing up. And the Eagles made the adjustment, and particularly their mentality. They all season their motto was "Let's hunt," and that's what they did. They brought the pressure against
Yep.
Mahomes. They saw that 2020 playbook that the Bucks did in the Super Bowl. They harassed him early and often, and the offensive line for the Chiefs was kind of in flux. They, moving
Yep.
through the outside. They were like, okay, they had to block, Carter on the inside, but they forgot about everybody else, particularly on the outside. Taylor always had problems. They were beating him up as well. And, yeah, I think overconfidence had a lot to do with it. They were like, okay, we're the three-peat. Let's talk to Pat Riley about licensing and all that. They weren't focused on the game at hand, and the Eagles were. And now they're going to be kicking themselves because both teams are going to be a little different going into next season.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned that offensive line and the left tackle position has to be addressed for Kansas City. Do we chalk this up for Mahomes just having a bad day at the office? I mean, this can kind of squash the greatest of all time. He is a great quarterback, and he's going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. And I'm not writing Patrick Mahomes off because look what he's been able to do throughout the course of his career. They need to recharge, they need to regroup, and they'll probably be one of the better teams again in the AFC next season. But I think. As far as the dynasty, you got to wait and see how it plays out next season. Did the Eagles break them? I don't know. Are the Eagles on the verge of a dynasty? No one can answer any of that, right? Let it sit and marinate. It's only been what, 24, 48 hours, but because that's how we are, right? It's that instant gratification and instant reaction, recency bias. But I'll say this. Travis Kelce looked disinterested, and I wouldn't be shocked if he retired. Andy Reid looked shell shocked. Spags looked overmatched. Mahomes looked average. They didn't even try to run the ball with Hunt. They didn't even try to. I thought Pacheco was going to be one of these X factors. I mean, Worthy had the most quiet 8 receptions for a buck 50 and a pair of touchdowns you'll ever see in Super Bowl history. He had a monster game, but it was all, again, smoke and mirrors towards the end. It was in garbage time. The one play Mahomes made where he scrambled to his right and threw across his body, and it was a dart for a touchdown, that was vintage Mahomes. It was so too little too late. You listen to the broadcast, they're going to tell you with 6 minutes to go and down, 50 something, they're going to come back. Wasn't going to be the case. I mean, my goodness. But is the dynasty dead? Is it too early to write Kansas City off? And, what do we look at Mahomes and just chalk it up to say it was just a bad day at the office?
I'll start with the first question. The dynasty's not dead. Look at the AFC. The AFC is still pretty open. It's a harder path, to be honest with you, than the Eagles have to deal with the NFC. There's so many good quarterbacks on the AFC side. I'm not going to say it's a bad day at office. I just think the Eagles had his number in this game, and,
That's a
and they
fair point.
harassed him. They beat him up. And the turnovers, we always tell, no matter if it's a preseason game or the Super Bowl, turnovers will kill you. And
Yeah.
he
But it was so
throws what,
one-sided,
two
Lloyd.
picks.
They had
Yeah.
25 yards. They had 25 yards in the first half. I mean, that's just
Oh,
it,
it was. I was shaking my head. We're texting each other. I was like, I can't believe this. It was like,
I mean, are we
like, what
talking
am
the
I
Eagles
watching
now
here?
85, 86 Bears? I mean, 78 Steelers, 86 Giants. I mean, defensively, the Bucks, those Ravens teams. I mean, you know, I'll let you finish your question or your
Yeah.
answer and then we'll get to it. But I know you think the dynasty's not dead, and then you just think that Mahomes just had an off night.
Well, they held him to 275 total yards, and their game plan was terrible, as I said, in terms of rushing the football. Andy Reid made no adjustments. They only rushed the ball 11 times for 49 yards, and that's the Eagles' defensive front. Some of those guys are lighter on the edges. Maybe you try to make a run at them, kind of wear them down, but you never saw that type of change from them. And as I was saying, it was early and often they hit Mahomes, and he just was not comfortable. He didn't look right, Q. It's about disinterest. They did not have the eye of the tiger coming
No,
out. You use my Rocky reference,
they
and the
they
Eagles
did.
did. The Eagles were ready to roll to a man, and everybody on their roster was like, okay, this is our chance. The one shot. Let's do it, and they did.
Which is hard to fathom because you're going for history. You're etching yourself in sports lore with another win, three straight, never been done, right? Super Bowl. Um, and you come out that complacent and flat. And, I didn't even bother to listen to the post game to hear what type of, excuses or rationale or whatever Kansas City was coming up with. Look, it squashes the narrative with Jalen Hurts. There's reports now Nick Sirianni's going to get a contract, a new contract, which, hey, man, you win a Super Bowl, you got that equity, man. He can go 6 of 11 the next 3 seasons. It doesn't matter. He's safe. The franchise quarterback is safe. They got young players. Sweat's going to get paid. You look around the NFC and you know the one thing when you win a Super Bowl, what happens? Players maybe get a little fat. Maybe they want a bigger contract. Maybe they go somewhere else. You lose coordinators, i.e., Kellen Moore. It's pretty much a done deal. He'll become the new head coach of the New Orleans Saints. I saw a couple of people came out and said, they don't think it's a good move because if you look at the cap situation, they don't have a quarterback. But again, you win a Super Bowl, you're a coordinator, you want a shot at a head coaching gig.
Yeah, Q, you're going to have those defections, and that's, everybody's going to say, hey, I lifted a lot of the shovel, and if I want to get paid, and you're right, Sweat probably going to go to place else and get some money, made himself a lot of money. The Eagles have money tied up in their receivers, in
Yep.
Saquon, in Jalen Hurts, and then they're
Yep.
going to have to. They still have to play Carter coming up, and
Yep.
some of those other young guys. So it's going to be interesting to see how Howie Roseman has hit all the right keys, this season in terms of free agency and trades and who he brought in is all worked out. But every season's different. And that's what was so special about, Kansas City not, being a back-to-back to even begin with. There were so many teams, they couldn't even get, two in a row. So three in a row, it just, you look at NFL history, it's just so hard to do. Hadn't been done since the Green Bay Packers all the way back, the NFL championship days. So, we'll see how the Eagles handle success. And that's always a big thing. Everybody's patting you on the back, but you got to get ready for the next season. But I know, listen to their fans, they've already said, hey, they have the roster and the team and everything. They're going to win two in a row now, three in a row. So, and when you look at the age of these players on the team, you're like, okay, other than Brandon Graham and
That's
maybe
right.
Lane Johnson, they're pretty young.
They're young, and that's scary. And by the way, from a odds standpoint, because that's what we talk about on Back Your Play, Eagles are plus 600. They're favored to win Super Bowl 60 according to odds from DK. They're one of five teams to sport better than 10 to 1 odds to win the Lombardi Trophy. The 49ers are plus 1,500 and have the shortest Super Bowl odds among teams that failed to make the playoffs last season. Then you have the Titans and the Browns, top two picks in the 2025 NFL draft. They're tied with the longest odds. Oh, by the way, if you are curious for my Giants, yep, sitting about plus 15,000. Now, Philly, Kansas City, Baltimore, Buffalo, Detroit, and then San Francisco, a down year. Cincinnati, they fixed the defense. Then you got Washington at plus 1,900. So I think it's going to be compelling the NFC East again. I think it's going to be compelling the NFC going forward. But we've got plenty of time to kind of dissect that. When you look at this Eagles season and this Eagles win, and in the fashion in which they just dismantled the two-time defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, is it a stretch to say that this is a top 10 all-time Super Bowl winning team?
I have to say yes, defensively, and me, Q, all along. I was like, well, Buddy Ryan's gangrene defense was probably better than them on paper and everything, but this group, they came together at the right times, and I think that the key thing is the turnovers. They got turnovers against, Green Bay, against Rams. They got four against Washington, and then they got, they beat up Mahomes so much. He has three turnovers in this game, the fumble, and then he was also sacked six times. So the defense was masterful, and you're right. A lot of those points at the end were window dressing when the game really was over. So it was just a dominant performance. It reminded me of, the way the Seahawks dismantled Peyton Manning's high flying offense in that Super
Well, that
Bowl
game was
many
after,
years
that game
ago.
was over after the safety. That game was over.
Correct. And that's the way I felt all through this game. I was like, Brady was trying to sell it. Well, I came back, with a 20 something deficit against the Falcons. And I was like, no, this game's over.
So
And
let me ask you
yeah,
this. So you're looking at the 72 Dolphins, the 85 Bears, the 78 Steelers, the 84 Niners, the 90 Niners, the 92 Cowboys. The Pats didn't win in 2007. We know. 76 Raiders, 62 Packers. My Giants in 86 were a friggin' juggernaut. 91 Redskins at the time, the Redskins. 2004 Patriots. Denver, you mentioned a couple years ago, the Ravens team at 2000. I mean, we can go on and on and on. The 93 Cowboys. Are the Eagles, you stick them right there because of the defense or because of the defense and what they did to the Kansas City Chiefs that were going for a three-peat?
and yeah, they stopped history in terms of stopping that
Yeah.
three-peat. You got to take that in. And then the defensive performance, you got to put them up there with all those great defenses that you kind of name, this defense just had their number. They shut them down, and it was just a dominant performance. I remember the '85 Bears dismantling the New England Patriots
Oh,
kind of like that. The game was over before you know it, and then offensively, they did their job. Hurts made all the plays when he needed to, and it was just state of satisfaction for him and Sirianni just cementing their legacy. So, there's a lot of Super Bowls, 59 of them, and I'm pretty old. I watched a lot of them. This was a dominant performance. I say in terms of the Eagles, they have two trophies now. I believe this team would have beat the 2017 team. That's how dominant that defense is. I think this is the best Eagles team, and um, Ray Didinger putting some new chapters, he told me, on his Eagles encyclopedia, and we'll see how it comes out. But I have a feeling this team is going to go down as one of the best Eagles team
I
in
remember
history.
as a kid there were a lot of blowouts in the Super Bowl, and you know, even if you go back to that 84, the Niners 38-16 over Miami, you mentioned the 85 Bears team, and that was a 13-3 game. They were up by 10 after one quarter, and then they just ripped off, what was it, 32? They had the safety in there and beat them 46-10. Um, that that was one of my earliest memories of just a team flat out dominating. Like Grogan did not have a chance in hell. Eason did not have a chance in hell in that game. Um, and I felt even when the Giants ripped through Denver and they beat them 39-20, that was an all-time great team, that Giant team in 86. I mean, they were on a friggin' mission. They lost two games. They lost to Dallas early in Seattle. What they did in the playoffs, 49-3 against the 49ers, they shut out Washington in the NFC Championship. And then obviously they slowed down Elway. Ravens, Tampa, right? Man, I thought Tampa did in Mahomes a couple years ago, but he just didn't have a chance the other day. And what I saw from that defense, you're right. I mean, there was an all-time great effort on the biggest stage. And yeah, I mean, you pretty much that cemented their legacy as the greatest Philadelphia Eagles team of all time. I mean, period. Unless they turn around and go 17-0 next year and do it again, but right now as it stands, it's an all-time great team. I do want to do a little housekeeping with you. The report came down that Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, it looks like that the Jets are moving on from Aaron Rodgers. And there was a report, they reportedly told Aaron Rodgers, hey, enough of the social media kind of nonsense, which means you can't go on McAfee's show anymore. And who knows how it's going to play out. And is that Aaron Glenn basically saying that if you're going to do it, you're going to do it my way. I'm taking control of this team, not you.
Yeah, and it's Aaron Glenn, the new general manager, coming in there and telling him, look, we have the hammer. You are under contract, but this is how we're going to bring you back. And you got to stick to this, in particularly,
And you got to
you can't
practice.
miss OTAs.
Yeah, yeah.
Remember, he missed all the off-season stuff
Oh,
last year,
yeah.
real arrogant, I'm fine, etc. He was not on the same page, especially with a lot of the younger players. And then, as you said, that whole McAfee thing, it's a distraction. Other coaches have kind of nipped that in the bud. I know Mike Tomlin did it a couple of years ago with Ben Roethlisberger. He had his show, and he was saying all kinds of things on his show, and it was kind of taken away from the locker room. And they said enough, enough. And most coaches I've talked to do not, they want it in house. You know what I mean? Yeah, okay. They want their quarterback to talk in press conferences, but um, I think with Rodgers, it's kind of just what we always thought. They're going to step away from him, and yeah, there may have be a few suitors out there, in particularly your team. I think if he wants to play, think about the Giants, the Titans. If they don't draft one of these young quarterbacks, maybe
I don't
they
want
bring
any
him in
part.
as bridge. But
I
I
don't,
don't think I don't think there's going to be a lot of teams that want him in
no,
his
no.
circus that he brings, and he's just going to limp off and retire.
Yeah, I have no desire for Aaron Rodgers. I'd rather go after Matthew Stafford as a bridge quarterback. I mean, look, for better or worse, he's been on McAfee regularly for years. He's making $1 million annually, right? So the problem is sometimes he doesn't talk football. I remember what he was saying about Jimmy Kimmel. Again, talking about the Johnson and Johnson, talking about the vaccination. Um, just saying stuff that you're like, shut up, man. Like nobody wants to hear this kind of nonsense. And I get why they listen and tune in because some people do want to hear some of that nonsense. And to your point, a team's going to have to want to take a flyer on that, knowing he's not giving that up. But I don't think the Jets have a better option at quarterback, right? But I also believe it's the right move if that makes sense because you don't need those types of distractions. And the Giants, I want no parts of him. I'd rather them go and try to maybe get a Matthew Stafford, and have that quarterback for a couple of years and try to squeeze out some more football out of him. And you can still draft a quarterback and still sign Stafford. I don't know about the financial ramifications, but yeah, we knew this. I told you from the get go. The Jets should have went after Lamar Jackson. I said steer clear, steer the hell away from Aaron Rodgers. And the Jet brass didn't listen. They didn't listen, and look what happens.
Yeah, maybe Joe Douglas should have called you. Robert's still on. They still have a job, but they cut their nose off to spite their face. They're like, this is our guy. We're sticking with him. You would have thought after it didn't work, after the Achilles season, 4 games snaps in, that they would have went another direction. But they doubled down. They brought him back, all his cronies, and he only won what, 6 games the whole time he was there. I
Horrible.
mean, it just shows you, the total disaster, and you can't blame Woody Johnson and now Aaron Glenn that saying enough's enough with Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers.
Yeah. What's not a total disaster of tuning into my guy Lloyd Vance. Lloyd Vance is Insider Football every Monday night, 8 to 9. You and Kevin do a great job. You can catch him live on SR 1029 FM The Game, Coastal Sports Network. Give him a follow. Give Lloyd a follow on social media at Lloyd Vance. He's always kind enough to join us on BYP. Even though the season is over, we will still do our regular BYP and drive hits because with Back Your Play, we start to look at the draft, we look at the betting odds, the lines, we look at the props, we start to look at the team totals heading into 2025, 2026, or, we play that little dicey game where we think what we think some teams, how many wins a team has in them next year. So we'll have a little fun with that. But as always, you can catch them during the week with me on the drive. And of course, Back Your Play, powered by our good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Check the show notes below. 20% off BYP20 as the snow comes down on this Tuesday along the east coast. Are you getting hit with any snow right now?
Yeah, it's already coming down. My
Yeah.
son's already talking about no school tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I'll
was
probably
just,
be
I was
shoveling
just,
tomorrow.
I was telling someone earlier, and I remember back in the day, you had to get up early and listen. For us, it was
Hmm.
KYW. And if your school closing was say like number 3:30 and you're a kid and you hear like 3:28, 3:29, 3:31, you're like, oh frig, 3:30 they skip over it, which means you
Oh
have
yeah,
school. Yeah, it's horrible. Now we don't
and
have to
and parents made their. I remember my mom's like, "You're going, see ya." Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, but at least you don't have to worry about having the Wonder Bread bags over your feet and then your sneakers.
your galoshes.
Yeah, so you're talking two Wonder bags, you know, 2 hours of beatings a day. So it was just, yeah, let's just say it was, a lot of fights on the bus because of those friggin' Wonder Bread bags. But
That's
hey, you know
funny.
what? They tried to keep my feet dry. So-
There you go, bro.
All right, brother. I always appreciate you tuning in and always appreciate you jumping on board. Thank you.
All right, Q. Talk to you later.